Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Diagnosis, the journey of young neurodegenerative caregivers, presented and hosted by the Cures Collective. The Cures Collective is a coalition of multidisciplinary stakeholders united across the neurodegenerative landscape to amplify awareness and accelerate scientific progress to unlock cures for all. We have 59 members and counting, representing ALS, FTD, Huntington's, Parkinson's, MS, MSA, and more. And our membership includes independent advocates and organizations. I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and to stay informed on our progress and ways to take action. And if you're interested in joining the collective, you can email me and I will put both our newsletter sign up link as well as my email address in our chat here in a moment. And with that, I am delighted to introduce you to our incredible panelists today. Lauren Holder is the producer and host of Help for HD Live, the first ever podcast created for the Huntington's disease community by the Huntington's disease community. Gene positive for HD herself, Lauren became involved in the community after her grandfather was diagnosed with the disease. Over the years, she has worn many hats, volunteering with various HD organizations to support the cause. And currently, Lauren serves as an HDYO ambassador. And HDYO is the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization, a member of HDCAB, and a member of HD PACE, and a member of the Patient Advocacy Advisory Council for the Institute for Gene Therapies. As an advocate, she collaborates with fellow HD community members to raise awareness about the critical urgency felt by the gene-positive, pre-symptomatic subgroup of people with HD. Together, they advocate for the need for effective treatments and highlight the willingness of this group to take on the risks of participating in clinical trials to accelerate HD research. Thank you for being here, Lauren. Sarika Mathur. Sarika Mathur's mother was diagnosed when she was 27 years old and pregnant with her with Parkinson's disease. As such, it's always been a feature in her life when she was younger, inspiring her and her sisters towards charitable and educational endeavors, and now in adulthood to an interest in direct volunteering and research. At 27 herself now, she studies health sciences at Queen's University with a new and more personal perspective of what her mother's life would have been like when first encountering the disease. She hopes to continue advocating for her through coalitions like the Cures Collective as much as she can. Thank you for joining us, Sarika. Maggie DeMarco is an advocate whose path was shaped by supporting her father, Anthony, through his journey with familial ALS and the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia until his recent passing in April 2025. Caring for him in her 20s continues to guide the way she shows up for families, especially young caregivers who are navigating similar experiences. Through caregiving, Maggie uncovered a dimension of advocacy that felt deeply aligned with her purpose, called forth by love and loss. She created an online community for adult children of parental figures with ALS and/or FTD that has grown to more than 300 members in a year. Maggie now brings her lived experience to her work with Hope Loves Company, the only national nonprofit dedicated to children and teens impacted by ALS. Michaela Jansen Pohl is a wife, a mom to her two young children, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and she has been a caregiver since she was in high school to her mother who has multiple sclerosis. She has her dream job working as a licensed mental health therapist, focusing in the areas of grief and loss and trauma. Michaela is also a volunteer co-facilitator of Teen Support MS. It is a monthly support group through the National MS Society for individuals aged 14 to 19 years old who have a parent with MS. She believes that the needs of young caregivers can be forgotten about, and it is important to advocate for this population so their voices are heard and they feel supported. Thank you, Michaela, for joining us. Patty LaFleur is the former care partner to her mom, Linda, who had younger onset dementia, and a former elementary educator of over 10 years. Patty designs and leads the Lorenzo House's programs with intentionality, knowledge, and love. Her capacity to connect with family members through lived experiences and profound generosity of spirit sets the tone for how Lorenzo's house shows up for families. Patty has a master's degree in instructional leadership and is a certified dementia practitioner who has spent countless hours volunteering with people living with neurocognitive disorders and is a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you so much, Patty, for being here. Well, we have an all-star panelist or panel today with incredible folks. And to start us off in our discussion today, I'd love to ask each of you, can you share a little bit about your caregiving journey and how old were you when your caregiving journey first began and what that experience looked like for you day to day? And Maggie, I'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for the introduction and thanks for having us here. I guess I should introduce, the sixth panelist, Theodore, joining us as well. He has his bow tie. Here for emotional support. So my name is Maggie, as I said. I'm 28 and I started caregiving, I would say, in my 20s. So my dad started experiencing symptoms of ALS and FTD in my early 20s, so 2020, 2021. And that caregiving journey during that earlier stage, I was living across country, and so it looked a lot different, which I think is important to note that caregiving can take a lot of different forms. During that stage, it was a lot of research, education, grants, trying to figure out how to purchase a handicap accessible vehicle, um, and that kind of support for the family. And then in my mid-20s, I began going back and forth from Colorado back to Virginia very frequently as the disease progressed. And then mid to late 20s, I relocated back home and was shared full-time primary caregiving responsibilities with my mom until my father's passing in April. And this looked like taking care of all day-to-day daily activities of living, so bathing, feeding, personal hygiene. He loved I one of my favorite memories is just the time that we spent together with the pedicures and learning how to give him a haircut and shave his face. But yeah, it was pretty much any function of living when you do not have function of your legs and arms and are confined to a hospital bed or rely on um, a wheelchair for mobility.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing your story with us and for helping us understand what your experience was like and also giving us a little, pulling back the curtain a little bit and giving us a little insight into what your relationship with your dad was like too. Thank you. Lauren?
My relationship was also with my dad. I was his caregiver as well, and it started it started when I was 15 when we found out about HD and my grandfather having Huntington's disease, and I started researching then what Huntington's disease is. Uh, And really, when I was 18, I started seeing some symptoms in my dad. Um, I became his primary caregiver in uh, 2015. And, before that, it was more shared with my mom. And then in 2015, he needed more care and needed me to become his legal guardian. So I was his primary caregiver from then on until he passed away in January of 2021 from HD. And yeah, I mean, it was tough. It was very tough. being in my 20s and married and, trying to balance it all, having two kids and an only child, and trying to survive all of that as well as working a full-time job, trying to keep things afloat.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing more about your story and your experience. And I think what we're hearing today, we wish it was a unique experience if there aren't other young people experiencing this. And unfortunately, there are so many, and your stories are going to help others feel seen, and less isolated in this experience. So thank you. Michaela?
I'm Michaela, and I have been a caregiver for, I actually just calculated it because of this panelist, for 22 years. My mom has multiple sclerosis, or MS. She was diagnosed 36 years ago, my age, soon after I was born. And she hid her diagnosis from everyone but my dad up until I was 14 years old when her MS significantly progressed. It was actually right after my aunt, her sister, my mom's sister, died from complications of MS that same year. And then she informed me and my sister and many other people in our lives that my mom also had MS. So I was a freshman in high school, and my caregiving roles have really shifted throughout the years. In high school and college and a few years after, I provided a lot of direct hands-on care to her because my dad traveled a lot for work, and I have a younger sister, so we were all co-caregivers to her. So those responsibilities included helping bathing, toileting, if she had urinary incontinence, helping her clean that up, helping her shift in bed if she couldn't transition herself, transferring to and from chairs and beds, making her meals, helping with house cleaning, doing laundry, all the things that a lot she used to do and help out with that she couldn't do anymore. My sister and I stepped in for that. Also, since I was the oldest, I'd say like within that 2 years, once I got my license, my mom stopped driving. And so I took on the driving. I was a chauffeur for my mom and my sister when my dad was out of town, taking my sister to all the activities she was going to, and taking my mom to her appointments. And then I stayed in the state I live in for college because I wanted to be there specifically to support my sister because she was home then, the only child by herself at that time. So I would come home on the weekends a lot. We would provide respite care if my dad would take, some long weekend vacations. So I would go back and help out with my mom. And then I'd say things changed. I became a less hands-on caregiver to my mom because my life changed. I got married. I had two kids. And I'm a mental health therapist, so I work part-time doing that. And so I now really focus on looking at research and providing that to my dad. I will make meals for them. And I also have I've connected with the MS Society to co-facilitate the support group for other teenage and adolescents who have parents with MS. I just wanted to add on one thing is that my mom's mood swings were a really significant symptom of her MS that I don't think is talked a lot very often. And so I also say that my role also was being a peacekeeper in our family. And that has really affected me throughout my life and now. And so it also has interrupted our relationship with my mom as well at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michaela, for sharing more about your experience being a young caregiver and how that has really impacted you throughout your entire life, including the version who you are today. Patty, would you like to share?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to Maggie and Lauren and Michaela for all that they've shared. The things that you have shared so far resonated so deeply with my heart as well. I'm Patty, and I am the daughter of Linda. So, my beautiful mom, Linda, was diagnosed with younger onset dementia when I was in my early 20s. So, I was graduating from college, and we were noticing these symptoms of brain change that my mom was experiencing. My dad stepped in as her primary care partner until my dad ended up getting sick. And so the same year that I got married, my mom moved in with my husband and I quickly learned how few relevant resources there were for young carers like us. And so I was grasping for straws. I was reaching out for support. I was a teacher at that time. I had been teaching. It was my passion. It was my heart. And my mom moved in with me, and I couldn't do both. I couldn't give 100% to teaching. I couldn't give 100% to caregiving. And there was nothing left for my relationships or for me. That was an afterthought. So I ended up having to step away from the classroom because as a family, it was a financially more reasonable decision for me to not have my income and become her full-time care partner. And through becoming her full-time care partner, I learned a lot about heartbreak and grief, but I was thinking a lot about what you were saying, Maggie. I learned a lot about connection and joy and living in the moment. And so quickly I went from this outside care partner who was supporting my dad to this really invested care partner that had to do a lot of tasks that weren't super fun, like incontinence and bathroom and showering. But I also got this beautiful opportunity to connect with my mom in a way that I never would have. So I learned a lot about selflessness and connection and finding meaning. And both of my parents passed within 6 months of each other 3 years ago. So I've also learned a lot about grief and about identity shifts. And now I have this beautiful opportunity every day to walk alongside families and specifically sons, daughters, and children who have a parent with younger onset dementia to find connection and community through Lorenzo's house, which was my lifeline as a daughter myself. So just so honored to be in this space, and thank you for letting me share a little bit about my mom and our connection.
Thank you so much, Patty. I love getting to know all of your stories and the support that you in turn are offering to young people now. I know we have so much to dig into. Serica, would you like to share your story?
Yes, I will be pretty brief. First of all, I want to thank the other panelists for sharing their stories. Truly so vulnerable, so powerful, and like I just have to say I hold the highest respect for all of you. It was really, really beautiful, all of your words. So as I mentioned in my like intro, I'm the daughter of a woman with young onset Parkinson's disease. So she was 27 years old and pregnant with me, her first child, when she became diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Um, so it's something that has very much been a feature of my life since day one. I haven't really known a mother without Parkinson's disease. And it's kind of, I think all of our relationship with the disease, with her, and with the intersection of those two things has changed a lot over the course of my life, of course, as the disease progresses. I'm definitely in a slightly different situation than a lot of our other panelists in that I'm not a primary caregiver. I think that role would probably I think I would consider most of the members of our immediate family as a part of that sort of caregiving team. But my mother is also, I'm not gonna lie, fiercely independent. Maybe to a fault sometimes, which we can talk about later on. But I think at its heart, the relationship you have as a caregiver is more of a relationship you have as a person with this other person going through a struggle than anything else. And that's the angle that I tend to look at it with. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear a lot more from the other panelists as well.
Thank you so much for sharing, Zach, and for being here. I think that was so powerful what you shared from the perspective of not knowing your mom without Parkinson's disease. All right, many of you touched on this topic, and again, thank you for sharing your stories. And there's so much to unpack in terms of how you've navigated your experience as a caregiver and how you have found care for yourself through this as well. Um, how has caregiving shaped your identity, friendships, education, or your career path? And I've heard a little bit of it from some of you, but Patty, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, caregiving and my family's journey with younger onset dementia has changed everything. I think that it's really hard to not have it have a pretty significant impact on your life, especially as a young caregiver. So I think we're all probably going to echo a similar sentiment in that way. But I think for me, it changed everything. Identity to me was really closely tied to roles before caregiving. And so I identified as a teacher. And when that went away, I identified as a caregiver. And then when my mom passed and that identity went away, I didn't really know what to do. I'm like, who is Patty outside of all of these other roles that I'm pouring into and giving to? And so I had to learn a lot about what it looked like to just be me and what it looked like to navigate life as a daughter that no longer had either of her parents and was trying to figure out what was next for her. And so everything shifted. My relationships with my friends, how I show up as a human is so much deeper and has so much more meaning because I lean into the moments and I stop and I listen and I'm able to connect and have learned patience. So not only am I a better human from my experience, although there's been so much heaviness and grief, but it really has altered my career path. I mean, without my experience with my mom, I would still be teaching kindergarten in a classroom somewhere. But instead, I have this opportunity to lead the programs at Lorenzo's house and build meaningful programs for both sons and daughters and children who are currently experiencing this condition and those whose person has passed. So every aspect of my life has changed, and it has changed in some of the most deep, beautiful ways, while also learning how to navigate the heartache. So everything's changed.
Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo what Patty is saying. It would truly, um, when you have a perspective from a young caregiver perspective alone, just looking at that, it changes things. I got into healthcare because I wanted to make sure that I could take care of my father correctly and appropriately, and became a CNA for that reason. And I also, when he got sicker, went to a job that was less stressful and where I could work at night in order to take care of him. So it really changed, you know, how I did, even my work not related to him. It changed what I advocated for, how I advocated. Um, and as far as identity goes, I have the disease myself. I have Huntington's disease. And so I was able to connect with my dad in a way that most caregivers can't. There's a very unique perspective when you are directly affected by the disease and know you are going to get that disease, and you are taking care of your loved one with it. And there is a type of anticipatory grief that is beyond really anything I can explain. Um, but definitely can relate also to that loss of identity after all of the caregiving responsibilities are done. And who are you now, and where do you put that energy and that purpose and all of those things? And even though you think to yourself, oh, good, now I can rest, you don't. Because the energy and all of that, it takes special people to be young caregivers. And so that all of that has to go somewhere. And so it comes out in certain ways, whether it's you're caring for another person. For me, it was then taking care of my grandfather with Alzheimer's, because um, I needed to be able to help somehow, and also putting that energy into my kids, and then learning to advocate for myself as well. So um, that those shifts in the roles and in identity are definitely there at different parts in your life.
So beautifully shared, Lauren. Thank you so much. And no one prepares you for the heartache. And I can't imagine what this experience was like to process your own grief, of seeing your dad go through this experience, and then also potentially processing your anticipatory grief for yourself, as part of this experience too. Thank you for sharing. Maggie, I saw you come off mute. Would you like to share?
Yes, I just want to thank both Lauren and Patty for sharing, and then add a little bit to that as well. I would even go as far to say, like, the identity crisis that almost kind of happens as you're preparing to go into that caregiving role, as you are almost facing that decision to, essentially put a pause on whether that be school, a relationship, friendships, work, living in a different location. And it's a decision, I don't regret whatsoever, and I would choose 1,000 times over again, but one that's very difficult because, there's a lot of grief involved in your own identity that you have for yourself. And so I know for myself, I'm a chef, and I've been working in kitchens since I was 12 years old. And so when I decided to move home at 27, and then I became caregiver, much it was a huge change in identity, because as a chef, you're constantly receiving feedback on how your food is or how you are performing in your job. And so I had recognized that with identity, I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time building my own sense of self. And a lot of that was built on how others were viewing me. And so with something like caregiving, and I'm sure the others can relate, there's a lot of parts to it that are not glamorous, and there's a lot of parts that you are pushed, um, you know, to a point that's really difficult, especially with, with some of the behavioral challenges and cognitive decline with FTD with my dad. It was very difficult. And so, when you're not necessarily receiving that external feedback that you're doing a good job and you're doing good, you're doing okay, and um, that what you're doing matters. You have to become really comfortable in giving that to yourself and affirming to yourself, even if you're not necessarily receiving that on a consistent basis for the person you're caring for. And so, even me and my mom started leaving little post-it note affirmations around the house to each other, or just repeating something in your head, you know, reminding yourself that what you're doing matters, is huge with identity. And then in terms of impacting, I would say for me, relationships is a huge one. And I think it uncovers a bigger truth of maybe society overall, and how society views some uncomfortable topics such as grief or trauma. And I think there's been progress made, especially in, the mental health field, but there's definitely a lot of room to still grow. And I think it's natural that people want to move away from things that feel uncomfortable. But as a caregiver, you can't do that, you know? And so, if you're listening and you're not necessarily a caregiver, but you're supporting someone who's caregiving, I think, something that I know that I struggled with in terms of how caregiving affected my relationships, where that I needed more people to sit with me through the discomfort of a situation that could not be fixed. Because I sat with my dad through his battle through ALS and FTD, which could not be cured. And I think that's shaped the way I view empathy and the way that I continue to try to show up for the kids and the teens that I serve with Hope Loves Company. It's not necessarily about saying the right things, it's just about being present with someone in their experience and knowing that, it's really difficult and uh, just staying there is something that is so important. And so I just want to say too that through that as well, you kind of learn who is there for you um, in the long run. And I think that is something that shapes a perspective in life and also shows how you can show up for other people. The last thing I'll say with this is just touching on what Patty said is I think being so close to um, potentially like the death and dying process or such traumatic events, I think really helps to show you the fragility of life and appreciate things so much more. Like you might stop more and appreciate a blooming flower. I know for me as well, when I play sports, I worry less about what I look like while playing the sport now and more about like, wow, look at how this is so fun. My body can jump because, when you watch someone lose their body's ability to do pretty much the most basic tasks, you are much more appreciative of, what your body can do for you. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. There were so many, honestly, little golden nuggets in what you just shared. Whether it was, I love the idea of the post-it note affirmations and just leaving that around the house for each other to see. It's such a small but meaningful and powerful way to let someone know I'm thinking of you. We're in this together, and that's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that and reminding everybody that it's not about the right thing. It's about showing up and being there with someone else in all of the feelings that they are showing up with that day. And on that note, I'm curious, what emotions have come up for each of you in your caregiving journey and experience that you didn't necessarily expect? And how have they changed the way that you view both yourself as well as the people around you? Michaela?
Yeah. So I'd say one emotion that is very surprising to me is anger. I'm not an angry person. And so feeling angry is really uncomfortable. And so I've tried to shift that anger into energy that I can help others with. I went into my job as a mental health therapist, specifically working with clients who have experienced grief and loss and trauma, because I wanted to help young caregivers. I wanted, loss is not only death. Loss can be a loss of identity. It can be a loss of who you thought your parent was going to be, or thought the way they were going to support you through your different type areas of life as you grow. And I was so lucky as a high schooler that the MS Society in Minnesota, where I'm from, had a really wonderful, supportive youth program. And I attended MS Youth Camp through the MS Society. I was a camper there, and I met a few other teenagers who also had parents with MS. So we connected and related. And then I became a counselor at that camp for many years, many summers. So I was providing support to younger kids. That's how I thought, hey, I could do this for a living. Because we had this thing called focus groups at camp, where you'd sat down with all your campers. They would talk about what it was like to have a parent with MS. And I thought, oh, I can facilitate groups, I can help people with this. Well, I'm going to switch my major from pre-med senior year of college to psychology, and I'm going to go and get my master's degree in counseling and psychology. And like my bio said, I have my dream job. I've always wanted to work at the place I work at. And I get to put my anger into something good. It has turned into empathy. I've always been an empathetic person, but it's so much stronger because of that.
Thank
That's
you.
a really great point, Michaela. I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry. Of putting the anger into something else. Like it's such a wonderful perspective and a wonderful way of looking at it.
Thank you.
And even naming it. You
Yeah.
said it so beautifully, like anger, feeling angry is really uncomfortable. And we've kind of put it into this box of if you have anger, don't talk about it. Just feel it on your own, you know? So naming it for everybody, because it is something that we all experience and feel, is so important. So thank you, Michaela. Sarika, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to go. Um, I think you specifically said an unexpected emotion, right? And something that I would consider very unexpected that I've encountered more and more like in my mother's journey with Parkinson's, um, maybe would be rejection. On some level, I don't know if everyone is going to share my experience with this because I think I mean, we're all dealing with very different diseases and we're all dealing with very different personality types. I love my mother and I feel a lot for her. And I think no matter what my journey is with her disease, it's not going to hold a candle to her own journey with her own disease, right? So I think sometimes when I try and help her more, or when I try and involve myself more, and I get told off or like told it's fine, I don't, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to engage with it. I think there can be an element of rejection there, which is very something that I wouldn't have expected, and maybe something I'm more aware of as I'm older. I mean, obviously the disease has progressed as I've gotten older very consistently. Um, and again, that's on me because it's up to me to realize that, like, for her journey with her disease, it's sometimes more important for her to struggle through something than to like have it done for her. But yeah, I think on the other hand, I'm still gonna have my own complex relationship with elements of that. So yeah.
That's such a great reflection, Seneca, and one to bring up of rejection because it kind of goes into the similar bucket of feeling angry. We don't like to talk about our sense of rejection. And if we experience it in a series of micro moments every day, you know, somebody asks for help or and we say no, or we offer someone something and they say no, and it's still a small rejection. And this experience of navigating what is my role as a co-caregiver, right, is so complex. So thank you for sharing more about that. I am also curious to hear from all of you on as you were navigating this, and Michaela, you've touched on this a little bit, and so have you, Patty, in terms of, you know, where you found support as you were navigating this. I'm curious to hear from others, where did you find emotional support and understanding? And in your younger years, what was it like to find support through friend groups? Lauren?
For me, I really found my support through my community, the Huntington's disease community, and specifically through a group called the National Youth Alliance, as well as a nonprofit organization known as HDYO, or HDO as we call it. But I've gotten my support really from the community and building those relationships and connections more so than even with my own family. And it's been it's been interesting accepting that, right? Because in my mind, I should have these great relationships with my family and have, other friend type support. And that's not there for me. I don't have that support. I have two little kids too. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I still experience a lot of anger over the fact that I don't have the family support when it comes to everything, especially when it came to caregiving for my dad. And it was really me and my mom against the world and taking care of my dad at the very end. Um, and I mean, obviously, it was during COVID, which complicated things as well. But I am so grateful for the friendships and connections I've built through the Huntington's disease community, because I don't know that I would have survived caregiving like I did had it not been for the people in the community making sure I was okay, listening to me at midnight whenever I was crying over, you know, whatever dad was going through or what I was going to face in my future. And um, truly just that's been life changing for me and life saving. Um, and there's had to be a lot of acceptance of things are not always how we expect it, right? To have the support. So that's been a learning curve for me, and lots of acceptance there.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing. And I'm sorry that you experienced moments and periods of isolation through this experience as a caregiver. And I'm also simultaneously so glad that you found people who you were able to rely on and connect with, because that is so special. I'm curious, you mentioned that you have built relationships with a lot of people in the HD community. How did you find people in the HD community and to even connect with?
Social media was a big part of it. Also, I mean, finding others in my community and having those connections kind of grow where they would know somebody and we were able to connect. But really, social media really started it all, and helping with connecting with other youth and being able to go to my first ever conference for HD. There was the National Youth Alliance there, meeting, all the youth was meeting and had their own space, um, which made it special because, you know, I didn't feel so out of place. I realized that there were others who were gene positive like myself, who had just been through testing. Um, and I was able to relate to people on that level. And, even now, as I help others who are younger, I just turned 40. So, um, but those who are younger who are now beginning their journey in HD, and in talking with them and helping them build those connections and relationships, we use social media to stay up to date and keep those, you know, the conversations going. So, social media truly just helped keep the connections.
Yeah, I just want to add, Lauren, like also the power of when we share our stories, either on panels like this or at conferences or on social media. Those are such beautiful opportunities to not only engage with others who are walking a similar journey or understand, like all of you, but they're also this opportunity for people who maybe aren't ready to identify as a caregiver or a care partner, or aren't able to see themselves anywhere else. They feel extremely isolated and alone. But when we share our story, it helps other people to feel seen and understood, right? One of the biggest moments for me as a daughter was I reached out to Lorenzo's house, and Diana, our founder, met me on the other side of the Zoom screen, and she shared her experience with her boys. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not alone," right? Like, I didn't even need to get my story out there yet to not feel so isolated. So I just want to name the courage from this whole group, like so inspired. But when we share our stories, it empowers others to share theirs, but it can also just help others feel seen. So I just wanted to highlight that piece. And Maggie, I saw you came off mute as well.
I just think what you're saying is so important, and I think it goes right back to what we were talking about earlier with, like challenging society's beliefs that talking about uncomfortable things, is negative, and that especially in response to difficult situations, whether it's traumatic situations, or grief, trauma, death, caregiving, that we should focus on the positives, and I think one of my favorite quotes by Brene Brown is shame cannot exist when stories are shared in safe places. And I think that's the way it was said. It might have changed I've remixed a couple words there, but nonetheless, exactly what you said, Patty. It does take a lot of courage, and I think recognizing also that feeling that can exist, the potential shame that can exist when you're unsure if it's too much to share, is important. But going back to what Lauren said too about findings at moments being in isolation, I've come to realize too that even if people can't show up to support, it doesn't mean that you aren't deserving of that support. And so sometimes, going back to your question, Aditi, it might not be about finding that support, but sometimes being intentional about building it for yourself. So I was really happy and grateful for a lot of organizations and resources that exist, whether it be I went to young adult support groups with AFTD, Liz Turner Foundation, CCALS, IMALS, you name it. And then I was too old for Hope Loves Company at that time. But similarly, what you said, Patty, is you never know when you're sharing your story who it might touch at that time. And 2 weeks following my dad's passing, I cried through every word, but spoke a memorial speech on the National Mall at the IMALS flag ceremony. And Jody and Laura from Hope Loves Company were in the audience. And then fast forward, now I'm working with them. So you never know where it will lead to. And, it's important for those that are listening and going through a caregiving journey or a diagnosis, that to know that like you are deserving of support, and sometimes that looks like having to set it up for yourself, but knowing that taking the time to set that up, you don't have to feel the shame of I should be able to handle this, or why is this affecting me, or I feel so weak. It's affecting you because you're having a natural human response to a really difficult situation.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Maggie said. All of you are not alone, even if it feels like it. There are a lot of resources out there, and I also know it can be really hard to find them. When you're a caregiver, you don't have a lot of time to do that. And so one of the questions, I don't know if Aditi you're going to get to it, but something with like a program that we thought of that could advocate and help young caregivers. I thought of like a little bit of a mix of like I don't know if it's a website or something that like for you're a young caregiver and you're looking for a support group around the neurodegenerative disorder that your parent has. Here's a list of them. You're looking for a mental health therapist that works with caregiving, grief, loss, trauma in your state. Here's a registry. You're looking for someone to relate with or a mentor. Here's some names. you're looking for financial assistance, whether it's for yourself, because maybe that's a loss, because maybe your parents have to utilize some of their financial resources that were going to be used for you in your future, and maybe they couldn't help you pay for college or beyond. Here's some resources, some financial resources. You need, uh, sorry, you need some legal advice or some financial advice to how to care for your parent. Here's some ideas. Maybe they're low fees, maybe they're free of charge. Those are the things that we need as caregivers, as young caregivers. So we have a lot going on in our lives, and we don't always have the time to search the huge web. It's a great tool, but there's a lot out there. So can we make it easier for us to find those resources and to utilize them and connect with each other?
Thank you so much, Michaela. That was really well said, and the perfect segue, because that was going to be my next question. So I want us to play a yes and. So all our panelists, yes and Michaela's policy program resource. What else would you like to see as the ideal resource for young caregivers?
Yes, and affordable access to mental health therapy.
Yes, and relevant supports that are built into either your workplace or to your education or your schooling. So different supports, understanding that can support you in both your workplace or if you're in college or in education to be able to access both of those.
Yes, and more public education on neurodegenerative diseases. In the last question, something that I was kind of pondering over, I think Lauren mentioned this, that you had a lot of support from people in your community, in your disease community, but you had a little bit maybe more trouble reaching out to friends or people who were not familiar with it. I would 100% co-sign that, not because I think people are uncaring or unempathetic. I think they're simply uneducated. And when you're uneducated and unfamiliar with something, you're going to be uncomfortable with it, right? So it's up to, I think, us and our organizations to work on educating the public, because when you understand something, you know how to offer support. So that would be mine.
I don't think I can offer anything better, guys. Like, you guys are just, it's awesome. And yes to all of it.
Yes, and I don't know a better way to say this, but a parent fill-in program. Your parent can't take you to college. Hey, can you be connected with an adult, a caring adult who can help you take you to college? Are you the host, family host now for holidays and you don't know how to cook a turkey? Can someone come and teach you how to do that in your kitchen? Just there's a lot of parent fill-ins that I think could really help young caregivers as well. When those roles that their parents would be playing for them, they're no longer there, and it's a big loss. So how can we fill those losses?
I love that, Michaela. Thank you all so very much. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask all of our attendees here today, do you have any questions for our panelists? And feel free to enter any questions in chat or come off mute and ask your question. Mimi, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to like figure out which person to ask. But the one thing I'm thinking of for Sarika, we talked a lot about like loss and like loss of identity, like the before the parent and had that thing and then the after and all that. But in your experience, it was always there. So I think you talked about it a little bit, but as far as the like struggles with hearing other people at your school, like your age or whatever, like having a different experience with their parent, like that, was it like normal for you, or did you feel abnormal, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I very much am aware that I don't think that my experience is necessarily going to reflect on everybody who grows up with a parent with a neurodegenerative disease. Because in my case, I would not say that it impacted my identity in terms of the way I related to other people. I was, first of all, because my parents, the way that they introduced us to the disease and to like when we were old enough to kind of understand really what's going on was not just like sitting down and saying, okay, this is what Parkinson's disease is, this is what happens. It was, here's a little bit about it, this is how your mother's involved with it, and here's what you're going to do next. Here are ways that you can get involved in the community. So my way of introducing the people in my like physical community, like in my school and my friends, was I was very, very involved with Parkinson's charity work and outreach and advocacy in my school. So I would be the one going up and doing presentations to try and educate people in my school, to try and make it more normalized for me, right? Because at the end of the day, I would say for me, my mother was never and is never to this day someone with Parkinson's before she is my mother. Like that's not the first thing I think of her. And I think again, I am blessed in that I grew up with it being very, very normalized. But she's definitely my mother first and foremost. So where other people have discomfort, maybe, and I can sometimes tell. I told a friend right before I logged on to this webinar what I was doing, and I could tell that there was like a little bit of discomfort on the other, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's not because people don't care, it's because they're unfamiliar with it. But for me, I would not say that I had a massive like struggle coming to terms with it. I think maybe it's more annoyance at the way the rest of the world works and the rest of the world reacts to things, which what can I do except continue talking about it, right? Yeah, thank you for the question though.
Thank you.
Sarika, thank you for sharing that. Because I often wonder, my kids are 5 and 7, and I often wonder, am I doing the right thing by being so open and honest about HD and doing age appropriate education, and as they ask questions, trying to do age appropriate and sharing like books that are age appropriate and everything on neurodegenerative diseases and stuff. So thank you for providing that perspective of growing up with it, um, and that it was just kind of normal and you were blessed to have it that way.
Yeah, I think you're doing something incredibly powerful by exposing them to it at a young age with age appropriate resources. I think there's a lot of different facets to growing up with a parent with a disease that will, I think their relationship with it will change over time, but you're giving them the proper basis to develop that. I think that's really beautiful and I really respect that.
Thank you.
Thank you all so very much to our incredible panelists. Patty had to drop right at 4 Eastern, and to all of our attendees, but especially to our panelists for being so open, so authentic, and so vulnerable in sharing your stories today. We will follow up with everyone who registered for the event with a list of resources for young caregivers. So all of the resources that you heard our panelists mention today, we will send you a list of them along with the services that they provide so that all of you have access to that. We will also share a link to our newsletter sign up, and I will also include that in our chat. But thank you all again so very much. I look forward to staying connected with all of you and to driving this movement to amplifying awareness about all neurodegenerative diseases and unlocking cures for all of them. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Aditi, for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Everyone.
much. And thank you so much to the other panelists. Your
Yes,
stories are
thank you
beautiful. I
so
learned a
much.
lot today.
Yes. Thank you all. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.